Hey everyone, it's Laura at What's It Feel Like, and I want to bring you a brand new interview today with a young man named Eric. Eric has a story of addiction with heroin that started with his mother being diagnosed with breast cancer. He actually started taking her prescription medications as he was dealing with the stress of her illness and also the depression that was setting in over watching her health decline. I talked with Eric about what started off as an addiction to these pills and how it spiraled out of control into going to the streets to getting heroin, and how it eventually left him with literally no will to live. Here's part of his story.
I was probably 15, freshman, sophomore year, just occasionally on the weekends would go out and have parties, have a couple beers. Painkillers were kind of popular, and I didn't drink every weekend. I was big in basketball and baseball and working out and sports, so it was something that if it was available and it was on the weekends, then I would entertain the idea, and then I would use that substance and try to have a good time. My mom got sick early on with cancer, and about when I was in 8th grade summer, so she battled breast cancer for 3 years and put it in remission. But that was my first incident of realizing painkillers were readily available at home. She never took a single painkiller, but as I got older and realized what those prescriptions were, it started out with just a Vicodin, just one Vicodin. Then after a couple weeks or a couple months, it graduated to 2, then 3, and then so on. Some time went by and Oxycontin was very popular. And when I entertained that idea, I was actually kind of scared of it. And then I seen everybody else using it. So my buddies were always the weekend warriors, per se. So once I tried Oxycontin, I realized that, wow, that was something that it helped me with kind of my underlying issues, being upset, probably clinically depressed because of what my family was going through with my mother. Once that metastasized, her cancer metastasized to bone cancer and got worse. I found myself needing more and more as I was going to college at Lindenwood University. And I remember the day walking out of class when my mom was in ICU, and I remember making a decision that I needed this. It was something daily at that point. To fast forward, after a couple years of usage, she got sick, ultimately passed away. And what is unfortunate with that, other than the obvious, is I remember at her funeral thinking, I'm physically dependent upon this. I'm mentally obsessed with this. And not only did I lose my mother, but I lost my supply. So I'm a business major, and heroin was readily available. It was cheaper. It was more bang for your buck, per se, and that's when I graduated in heroin. I would wake up every morning before I went into work, which is usually 4:30 a.m., and I would have to get high before I went into work. There was days where I couldn't get high, and I was barely alive, at least physically. That's how I felt. And when I would get high in the morning, I would be okay till about noon, but I always had the anxiety and the stress of when I get off work, what was I going to do in the evenings? That euphoria, that feeling, it's worked its way out of my system. I'm no longer high. So it was actually a constant battle, push and pull of getting high and then plotting when I was going to be able to get high again. And of course, finances always came into the picture as well. It was a vicious circle. I was able to make it in on days. I look back now at the energy I devoted to just getting high and getting into work, and then the days I couldn't get high, how much energy it took just to show up to work. Because at the end of the day, I always told myself, if I lose my job, I'll lose the finances to afford to continue with this substance.
When you start to come down off of it, can you describe how awful the physical effects are?
I always say it's the worst flu-like symptoms. I'm tired, but I can't sleep. I'm hungry, I can't eat, my lower back hurts, restless legs. There was one point in time when I woke up in the middle of the night and I was in withdrawals, and I had restless legs so bad to where I thought I was losing my mind that I had a pistol, and I had a thought process that if I would shoot myself in the leg, that it would alleviate the restless legs, and then I could go to the hospital and get pain medication to remedy, obviously, the pain that would be self-inflicted at that point. When my mom passed away and I continued on a daily basis getting high, the physical appearance started changing. I started losing weight, started to not engage in extracurriculars, no more basketball, baseball, hunting, fishing, all that stuff that I loved. I no longer had an interest in. Made pretty good money, had a good job at that time, and I lived at home with my father. And my dad's my role model, my mentor, my icon. He's my best friend. And it didn't take long for him to say, you know, it was the money. And he said, you make pretty good money and you have no bills, yet you always need money. And then physically I'm changing and emaciated, and my eyes are dark and kind of would bounce off the walls. That's how they would explain it. But when that transpired was a day, I couldn't give a specific reason, but I woke up one day and it was a day that I didn't want to live. I couldn't live with it and I couldn't live without it. So I didn't know what was available. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn or if you could ask for help. I would inquire kind of passively on what's available, but I thought you had to have a lot of money or know a lot of powerful people, and I didn't know either one. I didn't have a lot of money, didn't know a lot of powerful people, so I was ignorant to the fact on what resources were available. But when I woke up in the morning, I had no money. My dad told me that he wasn't going to loan me any more money, and I actually got in my car on the way to work, and I drove my car into an embankment. On the interstates, there's exit ramps, and the yellow water-filled containers that kind of safeguard from that corner getting off the interstate on the exit ramp was not there. Those yellow containers were not there. And I made a decision to drive into it as an attempt at suicide. Long story short, I'm here today. But when I did that and I flew through the passenger side window, I woke up in the hospital with no broken bones and no cuts and nobody there. My family knew, but nobody was there. They thought that I nodded off or passed out at the wheel. They didn't know till probably a year later that it was an attempt at suicide. I was sober. I wouldn't say sober, but no substances in my body. I wasn't under the influence. I was withdrawal, but I was not under the influence when I made that decision. And I think my oldest sister, she thought that I passed out at the wheel and that happened. But I didn't have the courage or the strength to tell them what really took place. And one of my good friends, still to this day, that wound up getting clean and sober, I told him the truth. He was one of my best friends. And I told him, I said, I drove my car into the embankment on purpose. And he asked me, he says, wow, it's that bad? And my response to him was, it's not that bad for you? And it just right then and there shows you the different stages that two guys that are best friends, two different stages in their path to recovery could be in. A year later, he called me and got himself help and is still clean and sober today. And it was told to me early on that if you take the moment and you reflect on how far you've come, you'll see how much gratitude you have.
It truly is miraculous that he was able to survive that accident, and after that, go on and work towards his recovery. In the next few days, I'm gonna share with you the story of his recovery and how he's now working as the admissions director at a local recovery center here in the St. Louis, Missouri area. But I also want to add something that we spoke about during the interview is towards the end. And I said, does anyone ever tell you that you don't look like a heroin addict? And he said, I get that all the time. But the truth is, I look like most heroin addicts. I look like your brother, your friend, your son. This is what we look like. And he's been in long-term recovery. And while he did lose some weight, and while I'm sure he looked different when he was in his active addiction, you would never know that he is in long-term recovery. And so as we look around and we see people that are either suffering with addiction or recovered, just remember it could be any of us. I sat down with someone a couple years ago to talk to him about addiction. And he said one of the most dangerous things any parent can say is not my kid, because it could just as easily be your kid as somebody else's. So I look forward to sharing with you part 2 of Eric's story. I thank you all for continuing to watch our channel, for subscribing. We're gonna share some videos here at the end, some more stories about addiction, and we hope you'll keep watching and supporting our channel. Thank you.